Every bully needs a victim, and every narc needs a punching bag. Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Mommy So True. If you're dealing with narcissistic abuse, you want to subscribe to my channel. Today's video is to talk about why scapegoating is so venomous, what scapegoating is, what it feels like to go through it, what it does to you, and how to thrive out of it. If you come from a toxic family, if you're in a toxic family, or if you're in a narcissistic, toxic dynamic, you may have been scapegoated. Maybe one of your siblings are the scapegoat of the family, or you're trying to figure out where you fit in at. Children get scapegoated because they don't represent that parent the way the parent wants them to be represented. Like these narcissistic dads who make their sons suffer because they're not good enough at sports, or they're not playing a certain sport good enough for the dad's liking. That's how scapegoating typically starts as a kid. For me, it was academics for my mother. A narcissistic parent only loves you for the qualities that they value in themselves. Scapegoating boils down to complete projection, which I understand now at this age finally. They try to project that to the world and let the world see that they have this perfect child, this perfect athletic child, or this A scholar child. And if you're that child who don't measure up to these expectations for that narc mom or dad, you become a scapegoat. Now here you are growing up struggling with anxiety and depression. You don't trust people. You don't trust yourself. You're always doubting yourself. Post-traumatic stress, drug addictions, alcoholism, bad behaviors, in and out of jail, always in trouble. And then you fall into having this victim pattern in your life as an adult when you've been scapegoated from childhood. Scapegoating does a huge harm to your life. A lifetime of suffering when you've been the scapegoat of your family. A lifetime of depression, a lifetime of sadness, a lifetime of tears. The good thing about it is, as an adult, you gain strength once you start realizing that this is what you've been dealing with. Most of the time, scapegoats do thrive out of it. They learn how to distance themselves from this because it doesn't feel right. Narcs are so afraid to be emotional, and they're so afraid of true empathy that they will attack you and shame you as a scapegoat just because you have that capability. One of the things that happens when you're being scapegoated, especially as a child, is you are given undesirable things to do when you compare the chores between you and your siblings. I remember growing up, I met my mother when I was 6 years old in the United States. I migrated from West Africa. And almost immediately, I recognized that my sister and I were treated completely different. We're only 3 years apart, but when it came to chores, I was treated like a stepchild. I was given some of the dirtiest things to do, some of the meanest things. A lot of parents do this to their children. And it makes a child feel isolated. It makes them feel unloved, abandoned, and then it makes them feel the need to now start competing with this sibling, which is so toxic and so unhealthy. Children who are scapegoated don't get love and approval from their family members like they should. They don't get no type of positive attention. If anything, they're always the problem child. They're always the reason why something is going wrong. They're always the reason why mom is upset, or mom's not feeling good, or dad's mad, or it's always their fault. And as a child, you can only say and defend yourself so much if you have a narcissistic mom that's making you a bad child or a problem child. And now neighbors, friends, and other family members all believe and fall into that. How do you get out of that? I remember as a young girl, when conflicts arose in my family, or when issues came up with me and my mother and outsiders had to step in, they all believed my mother. They all would always ask me, why do I think she would hate me? Or why do I think she's mistreating me? They all would also gaslight me and make me feel like maybe I was crazy for noticing that the household was unfair. That is how they project things to outsiders, and then everyone is now against you, and then now you're definitely a scapegoat. We have these narcissistic parents who take things out on their children that end up being the scapegoats. You might look like the other parent that they don't like at the moment. For me, I feel like a lot of the mistreatment that I had in my scapegoating process as a child had a lot to do with the fact that my mother was no longer interested in being married to my dad. And I looked a lot like him. And maybe every time she looked at me, it was triggering for her. And in a very sick way, it's like she was making me pay for how she felt about him. And that happens a lot in the scapegoat dynamic with children. And then you have that aspect of that narc parent being envious of that child. We have, those daddy's girls or those mommy's boys who that other parent might be jealous of because of their relationship with that other parent. So behind that other parent's back, they might mistreat you. They might make you do dirty housework or not let you eat in the house and treat you like you're just an it because they despise your relationship with the other parent. This even goes as far as to being molested by your own parent. A lot of narcissistic parents molest their children. And then they psychologically abuse them and make them feel like they were molested because of something that the child did. And that is so damaging as a child and as an adult. I remember being a kid and always wondering why no one seemed to love me in my house. I really just felt like there was no love for me there. I even had a journal and I used to write in it. And I remember my mom found that journal when I was about 13 years old, and she read some things in there that made her treat me even worse afterwards. Being scapegoated makes you so antisocial, makes you want to just keep to yourself and not even want to fuck with people. It's so crazy looking back at it. In the phase where I was the golden child for a couple of years in my life, and that was only because my sibling, who was the golden child, was now not good enough for the parent because she had developed all these learning disabilities. She didn't come home with straight A's. So that role has switched for a little while. And that was like, in, I think maybe middle school, when my mother realized that my sister was not that smart. So then she flipped the script and started treating me nicely. And then now my sibling, who was just a golden child, felt the need to start being competitive and almost very envious with me, to the point where now almost 15, 20 years later, the roles have switched again because I decided to speak up against the toxicity in our family. And now I'm the scapegoat and she's the golden child because I am not going for the bullshit anymore. You guys hear how confusing and what a cycle this is, and how much and how traumatic it is to have a lifetime of this, and to be a scapegoat is just so, it just comes with a lot. It's mentally draining, it's emotionally draining. And it doesn't just go away. It doesn't just disappear. You can thrive away from your family. You can thrive away from the situation. But because they are your family, it doesn't really go away. When it comes to scapegoating in general, people make people scapegoats when they're trying to avoid the truth about themselves. Scapegoats are highly intuitive people. Scapegoats are sensitive and they can sense dysfunction. A lot of scapegoats are the ones that are going to say things to family members, that are going to speak out about things. And from a very young age, from the time you were born, your frequency was so high that they knew it. They knew they had to start making you feel low so you can start shutting up. They didn't want you to expose things. That was the whole purpose. The devil uses these narcs to scapegoat us because they don't want us to be great from the beginning. But guess what? God is the author and the finisher. God is the one who ordained you to be great. No one can stop that. All they can do is try. As a child, you sense toxic bullies. And family members in a narcissism dynamic, they can't have that. So they had to start throwing blows. They had to start making you feel like you were wrong when you did nothing wrong. Very highly empathetic people are scapegoated, and they make narcissistic people so uncomfortable. These people just can't admit that the good in you brings out the demons in them. As a scapegoat, you're targeted verbally, you're targeted emotionally, and sometimes even sexually abused. I had this narcissistic uncle, which I now see now looking back, who used to project and tell my family that I was a bad little girl while he was trying to molest me in secret. Now I know that it was projection, also known as the narcissist telling on themselves. He was projecting his effed up behaviors because that's who he was, and he knew what he was doing to me. He was making it seem like I was a bad girl, and meanwhile I'm this innocent young teenager, still a virgin, not even thinking about sex, all to cover up his dirt. Adding to the scapegoating, I learned that the term scapegoat actually comes from the Old Testament. And it really just stood for when sins were casted on goats for a community of people, and then they would throw these goats out into the wilderness, basically sacrificing goats. So if you think about that and you look at your own life and how you've been scapegoated, it just tells you that a scapegoat is a person who is blamed. A scapegoat is someone who is blamed and shamed for the wrongdoings of a narcissist. Those goats didn't do that. Those people did that. Why y'all putting that shit on them goats and putting them out there to go die and suffer? Don't that remind you of what you're going through as a scapegoat? Narcissistic families have so much unresolved drama and so much untreated personality disorders that eventually someone in the family becomes a scapegoat. Someone becomes that golden child who has a completely different experience from the scapegoat. The golden child is completely blind to it. From childhood, the golden child is completely blind to the scapegoating. To them, they think mom is perfect, dad is perfect. They think home is perfect, life is great because they're treated with kindness and love. They get all the attention. They're doing everything that mom and dad expects and want out of them, right? And sometimes that dynamic can flip. In my household, my younger sister was once the golden child. I was the scapegoat. Then at some point in life, it switched, and then it switched again. It's just so crazy. And I realized, though, that it only switched because of my development as a person. And as I was going through phases of life and I was learning things and detaching and getting away from the abuse, the roles were changing back and forth, which I'll talk about later on in another video. Scapegoating is the reason why you're at risk for choosing messed up partners. The reason why you're so at risk for dating narcissists, because when you've been the family scapegoat, all you know is being unloved. All you know is mean love. All you know is dismissive people. The pain of a scapegoat is almost unexplainable. There's so many examples that I can give that will bring me down to tears, because even after so many years, looking back to some of the pain as a child, it hurts. And it hurts to even understand that because of those pains, I made certain decisions in my life that almost caused my life. Eating disorders, drug addictions, self-hatred, suicide attempts, feeling so unimportant and isolated from the world, always feeling lonely. That was a lifetime battle until I became my own advocate. I walked away, ran away, I distanced myself, moved away. And once you do that, the power of scapegoating starts to go down. You start defeating your family. They can no longer affect you the way that they used to once you become your own advocate. You got to realize that this abuse does not define you at all. This is just a basic overlook of scapegoating. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Take time to leave a comment and share your experiences of being a scapegoat. Share your thoughts on this matter. You can own your power starting today. Now that you know a little bit more about scapegoating, take your power, sis. Take your power, bro. Thank you for tuning in. This is Mommy So True. I'll be back with another video.